Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Future is Bilingual podcast. Very excited today. I'm sitting with Tiffany, and I just want to talk to her, but we have to start recording. So, Tiffany, tell us, who are you? What do you do? Where are you from? Who's in your
Yeah.
family? All the good stuff.
So, as you said, my name is Tiffany. I am 37 years old. I have a husband and two children. My firstborn Amelia will be turning 5 soon, and then my little boy will be turning 3 in August. He's 2 right now. And we live in New Jersey. We have been living in New Jersey for a while now. I want to say probably 8 years now. So yeah, I met my husband, who's a New Jersey boy,
Okay.
through a mutual friend. And then, yeah, we dated and things took off rather quickly with him. I moved in with him in Jersey City first. Then we got married. And once we knew we wanted to start a family, we decided to look around rather than stay in Jersey City. And we found a beautiful little town called Belleville,
Nice.
which is not far from Montclair, or actually not far from Newark as well. So that area. And yeah, we've been here for a while now, 5 years, I want to say. And I work as a communications associate at the Sabin Center for Climate Change Law. So I promote all the center's activities. They're a joint center of the Columbia Law School and the Columbia Climate School. So
Very cool and very
yeah,
important. Thank you for
very
all that.
important work.
Yes, thank you for
Yes.
doing that.
Yes, I've been an environmental advocate for a while now, so it's something I feel very passionately about. So I'm really happy to be helping promote their activities.
No, that's great. We
Yeah.
need people like you, right? Because there's a lot of us that are just we're environmentalists and we're passionate, but we're not going to actually make it our career because we're you know other
But it
things.
also helps to do it in your personal life, right? If you take
Oh, for
actions at the
sure.
individual level or
Yes.
within your family, I think
Hmm.
family unit, I think that also makes a difference.
Schools,
If we,
teaching
yeah,
kids. Yeah.
keep teaching, educating your children,
Hmm.
handing down if you're interested in gardening, if you're interested in, nature walks, whatever it is, do that with
Yep.
your children, and that they will become passionate as well.
That's a great point that like it doesn't have to be this huge undertaking. Like there's little things that we're doing anyway. Yeah. We go for walks
Exactly.
every day. We plant some seeds, like that's yeah, even those small steps count, which is thank you. Yeah, now I feel better. Awesome. Okay, so Tiffany, where are you originally from? Because you said you moved to New Jersey.
Yes. So I grew up in France. Um, and just to back up a little bit more, I was actually born in Colombia, South America.
Oh,
And I was adopted by my adopted parents are French and American. So my father is French and my mother is American. They met in the
wow.
States, and she loved France. She loved the French language. So she fell in love with a Frenchman who
Mhm.
was overseas to do engineering school to get his master's in engineering. That's where he met her, and then she followed him to France. So
Wow.
yeah, they made a life in France, and then they decided to try to have children. That didn't work,
Mhm.
and so they were looking into adoption. And they had a friend at the time who was working. He was French, and he was working as an expat in Colombia, and his wife was volunteering in this orphanage, I want to
Mhm.
say, called La Casa de la Madre y los Niños.
Mhm.
And so that's how they got that connection to that place in Colombia. And
So
then they started
wild.
the process
How
to
many
start.
things had to fall into place for them to meet
I
and them to then try and them to have this friend and then that friend to be in, oh my gosh, it's like
I
before you
know
were even born, like all the things that had to have happened. And then you
exactly.
traveled the world in like your very first couple, like, I don't know, the year of your life, right? You've already gone all over.
Exactly. Yeah, it was pretty
Crazy.
amazing, the whole story behind
Hmm.
that.
It's like a
So yeah,
book.
yeah, exactly. They started the process, the adoption process, and first they adopted my sister, who's from another family in Colombia. So we're not related, we're not blood
Okay.
related.
Hmm.
And then 2 years later, they were able to adopt me at that same. It's not I say orphanage, but
Right.
it's a nonprofit organization,
Hmm.
and they take in women who are pregnant
And
and
need
don't
help.
know and need help.
Right.
Exactly. They need, like, they have conflicted pregnancies. They don't know what to do. They don't know if
Right.
they want to keep the baby. They
They
don't
don't know where
have
to turn.
the
Yeah.
support. Yeah, exactly. They don't have the family support, financial support. So
Wow.
my mother was taken into La Casa de la Madre y los Niños, and in Bogota. And yeah, she was there for 9 months, and then she gave birth to me. And then a week later, my parents came to get me. I was only a week old. They don't do this anymore in Colombia. I think
No.
the mother has like 3 months to decide after the birth. She has 3 months to decide whether or not she wants to give up the baby for adoption or keep him.
Such a That's such a sensitive topic, because I can see both sides. That, like, if you are going to end up with the adoptive parents, of course they would want to have you from the moment you're born, right? Like, for them, that's your birth, right? Like, they want to be your parents. And then, but the other side, like, yes, this birth mother, she also gave birth to you, and she deserved her time. And then there's the whole, like, if they're conflicted of whether to keep you 3 months, I mean, can you imagine, like, the mental load of, like, should I not, should I, you're just going back and forth, making pros and con lists in your head for 3 months. I mean, that's also very, I don't know, I don't want to say stressful, but like, very, it just weighs on you when you have this decision. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm for or against, like, more time, less time, or I guess having the three, they can decide sooner, right? It's just a bigger window, which is, I think, always good, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
But you're right. I mean, in this case, I'm sure it was like easier for her. Like, she gave birth to me and that's it. I was gone. I didn't have any time with her.
Right.
It just probably made the process easier, just
Yeah,
to
you don't
give
connect as
she knew she
much.
wanted to give me up to, exactly. Like, she knew she wanted a better life for me,
Right.
which is something I was able to really have. So I'll always be grateful to her, but yeah,
It's
that's
a very sensitive topic for many people. My
yeah.
family as well, there's adoption,
Yeah.
not my, but my mother's generation. And then also, I have friends who were adopted, and yeah, it's the most, like, heart-wrenching for everyone involved. I think that the kids want to know their parents, and the parents, they don't necessarily want to give them up, but they have to for,
Yeah.
reasons, money or job or what have you.
Exactly.
Age. I mean, there's so many reasons.
There's
Yeah.
so many factors. Yeah.
So
And actually, when I went back to Colombia in 2012, I went to La Casa, and I met with the woman who was the one who facilitated the adoption. And she remembered my parents. She had an amazing memory. She remembered all the kids that she helped with the adoption. She remembered all the families that the kids were placed with. And so she remembered my parents very, very well. Like, her memory was just unbelievable. And so I was able to spend time with her, and she gave me like an hour of her time where she took out my file and she kind of explained the circumstances under which I was given up. And I knew about it because my parents, and I call them my real parents because they're the ones who raised me. They explained everything to me. I don't actually even remember the conversation we had about them telling me I was adopted. I always knew I was adopted. This was always like an open
And that's
topic.
a whole nother issue, right? Like, do you find out about it when you're in your 20s and you're like, what the, right? It's like how parents choose how, it's just, it's so fraught. I feel like the whole
is
thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've heard cases where the parents don't want to, divulge that information to them. And then the kid
puts them in a
figures it
vulnerable,
out.
yeah, it does put you in a vulnerable place. I feel like, where the kid could turn on you and say, you're my real parent. And I don't have to listen to you. Because even my own blood, the only kids I gave birth to, they'll say things when they're mad at me. I don't like you, mommy. And I hate mommy. I'm like, I gave birth to you. 9 months of my, so even, can you imagine, like, the kind of the attacks they could throw at you, right?
That's never been the
Scary.
case. Thankfully, it's never been the case with us. They've always been very transparent about everything, and
it's
down
probably
to
the best
telling
way
me,
to go. Just be honest.
oh yeah, just be honest, and I think there's a little bit of, of course, there's fear on their part of, oh, will she want to try to meet her biological mother? And what if she does end up meeting her and then she forms an attachment with her mother? Then what happens to us? There's that like angst,
Fear.
there's that fear, there's that jealousy almost, I want to say. So, but just to let you know, I never got a chance to meet my biological mother. It wasn't in the cards. For whatever reason, I did leave a letter at La Casa. I did say if she ever comes to you and shows interest in finding out about me, well, here's my
That's great.
information, here's my email, and just give her this letter. I just wrote a very brief letter just telling her
Did as
how
much as
amazing
you
my
could.
life is.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Wow.
So yeah, that's the story, the birth story.
It's quite a story. You
And
should write a book.
I know,
I'll
right?
endorse it.
And so yeah, so we grew up in France, my sister and I, and my parents spoke to us in English at
Okay.
home. Yeah, so I I always always had perfect English. Like I never had an accent. I always, of course, since I live in the States now, of course, it probably my accent got better, but it was I never had like a French accent when I spoke in English because my parents spoke to us in English. And even to this day, it's not natural for me to speak French to my father, who's French.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's not natural. Like we'll do it like when we're in a French setting, like if
Right.
I'm with my parents in a 100% French setting, like with my French family, my cousins, aunt, uncle, then of course I'll speak to my father in French. But when we're at home, if it's just me, my sister, and my parents, we all speak in English together. Yeah, so it's always been like that.
And
And
what if friends came over while you were growing up?
yeah, well, it depends on
What
who
would
the
happen?
friend was.
Okay.
Yeah, it depends on, yeah, on we had for the first 5 or 6 years I was enrolled in the French, public school
Right.
system. Um and so I had French friends, obviously. So whenever they would come over, we would only speak in French.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I was 5 or 6, maybe 6, my parents enrolled me in an international school in the suburbs of Paris, à Saint-Germain-en-Laye, le
Mm-hmm.
lycée international de Saint-Germain-en-Laye. So I was there from yeah, I guess first grade to all the way to high school, right? They do,
Oh, wow.
yeah, they have the full, all the grades
Mm-hmm.
up until high school. So I did my baccalauréat, option internationale.
Mm-hmm.
So I was there. So that's when I started really having like international friends, people from all over the place. It was
Yeah.
really international. You had people from Portugal, from Spain, from
So cool.
Germany, from Japan.
Mm-hmm.
So I was, of course, in the national section, the American section.
Mm-hmm. And did
So
people mostly speak English then? Since
yeah,
it's international.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So I made a lot of American friends, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But I was attracted to all sorts of backgrounds, not just American. I
Mm-hmm.
I made all kinds of friends, and
That's great.
I love that. I love the multicultural aspect of the international school. There was no separation. Everybody was just, everybody looked different or sounded
But
different.
all in
Everybody
the
spoke
same
several
place.
languages, but we're
Mm-hmm.
we're all people. So
Right.
I never saw even like, I know in the States, we tend to be very focused on the skin color.
Mm-hmm.
I started really noticing that like here in the States, we're so
Mm-hmm.
focused on like superficial aspects of the
Yeah.
skin color of, where are you from? You look like this, but
Yep.
you know, whereas I'm not used to that. Having grown up in such a diverse multicultural setting, we
Yeah.
never questioned. Nobody ever asked me, why are you brown and your parents are white? I never got that question growing up.
Yeah. And you would have in the States for sure. Like people would
Exactly.
have noticed that immediately and they would have
Immediately.
commented. So somebody either discreetly or non-discreetly would have said something.
Exactly.
Yeah. And just to play devil's advocate, I'm all for international schools. I think it's great. But did you think your French suffered, or did you take French classes? Like
Yeah.
how do people maintain? I'm just wondering. I just did the whole live on the francophonie, right? So like French, you got to promote French. So I got to play devil's
Yeah.
advocate. How did you maintain French? Because I mean, school is like your life, right? Like it's like
It
work. You spend the
is.
whole day. You spend 7, 8 hours there. You make the
Yeah,
friends. If you're speaking in English with them, you're going to be hanging out after school speaking English. So
true.
how was your like? Did you think that your French got worse, or and especially you
No.
weren't speaking it at home? So like, yeah, how did you
Yeah.
end up balancing and maintaining? And
Yeah. That's a really good question. Well, I have to say the international school that I attended was very good at balancing both, I think. And it was
okay,
actually primarily, so the French part of that school for the Lycée International
mm.
was public. So you didn't have to pay for that part.
Oh
And then
nice.
the national section, that's where you had to pay. That's the private part of it.
Mm.
But it was really, I think it was mainly, we had French classes in, whatever it was, geography, history, grammaire, littérature was in French. And then the national section was less hours of classes in my case in English than French. And the French part was always very, very I want to say not strict. I mean, French teachers are stricter.
Yeah, I was going to say
in
that,
my experience than
that
American
does actually
teachers.
track. Yeah, that tracks pretty well.
Yeah, because we really had
Rigorous.
Very, very. That's the word, rigorous.
Rigorous.
Yes,
There we
very
go.
rigorous, rigoureux. Right.
There you
I
go.
wasn't sure if you could say that same word
You
in
can say
English.
that in
But
English.
yeah. Okay. Yeah,
Rigorous.
rigoureux. Yeah, beaucoup de rigueur. It really and there were times when my writing was not rigorous, and the teachers would say they would grade me poorly and say, you need ça manque de rigueur, needs to be more structured and all of that.
Yeah.
So they were very, very good teachers, and it was a tough school. It was a very tough school. You really had to be disciplined.
Yeah. We don't take it lightly. Right? French teachers, they do not take their subject lightly. So
yeah.
You better get it right.
You better get it right. Exactly. So, and the American teachers were very good too, but I noticed from the get-go the difference in the way that they taught.
Cultural.
The American teachers taught.
Yeah.
Cultural.
It's cultural. It's the, hey, we're all in this together. You can call me Lauren, and it's fine. Yes. And the French teachers are like, I am Madame, you you listen to me while I lecture, and you understand, and then you give it back to me verbatim. Just do the thing I told you to do. It's not, what's your opinion? How does that make you feel? Let's all talk about this and take a brain break for 5 minutes. Yeah, no, it's a whole different ball game, right? Yeah. And I didn't do school. I did university in France, and 2 different universities. But I did a semester in Le Mans, and then a semester or actually a year, la licence 1 arabe. So I did a year of an undergraduate degree in Arabic in l'Université de Rennes in Brittany. So Rennes. But yeah, I mean, there's just a different culture. It's just a different mentality, the way teachers teach, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say that the American teachers, in my experience, were always so positive. Not to say the French teachers weren't positive, because there were some very good, positive teachers, but it was always it was a difference in terms of what
you did great. Pat you on the back. You did a great job.
Exactly. You did a great job for the American teachers. Let's work on this. Whereas in France, it was you need to work on this. Oh, but this was good too. But you need to work on this.
The focus is on the negative.
Exactly. Yeah. That, I mean, I know it's a nutshell. It's kind of stereotypical way of describing it, but really that's what I felt in my experience.
And you're not the only one who's lived through it. And even, I mean, I've talked about this to students, and just how the French mentality is they're not going to say oh yeah, I'm doing well, everything's good. They're going to say pas mal. They're going to use a negative, it's not bad. And there's plenty of creators online that make videos about this, because literally they're going to use negatives or double negatives to say the same thing we could just say with a positive. It's not bad. Can you just tell me it was good? No.
Exactly. Whereas the American teachers, my favorite teacher, I won't say his name, but he was the most positive person I've ever met, even to this day. And I'll tell my husband, the words that he would say, he would say this was fantastic, this was great. And he had so much energy in the classroom. He was always moving around, and he had so much energy, and he would make you feel like a stellar student, even though, objectively speaking, I probably didn't do that well. But the way that he made me feel was wow, you did amazing. The presentation was great. Your essay was great. And then he would just tell me nicely, but you have to work on this too.
Yeah, you gotta get real.
Yeah, you have to work on this. But this was great start. Great work. So
when did you first come to the States? Like you said, you grew up in France.
Yeah, for the States, I decided to apply to a college, to several universities in the States. I knew I wanted to study music. I was a very avid musician, singer. I played piano. I was in school plays. I had some leading roles in school plays, including Maria and West Side Story.
Ooh.
And then I was Carmen in my senior year in high school. I played Carmen. So I had a teacher who was who really encouraged me to apply to great music programs in universities in the States. And she told me you should apply to Indiana University.
Mhm.
So I applied, I auditioned, and I got in. And it's one of the top rated music programs in the States. There's Juilliard, but then there's also Indiana University School of Music. So I was in awe. I was like, oh my God, I got in. So I spent a year at Indiana University studying classical music, studying opera, and I loved it. I really enjoyed it. But after a year, I decided, well, there's also other factors. I had a boyfriend in France, and there are many, you're young and you're stupid. But I also knew that I didn't want to pursue classical music. I wanted to pursue pop, like more modern music. I wanted to be able to write my own songs, perform them in front of an audience. And
you have
so
to try to realize what you want or what you don't want.
Exactly.
I mean, we all go through those things where we give it a try and it doesn't work out, or we just realize like, no, this doesn't really want to, I could keep putting 4 more years or 3 more years into this, or I could just, decide now that this is better.
Exactly. Yeah. And I'll never regret it because it really gave me an amazing experience there. So what happened is I ended up going back to France and pursuing something more conventional studies. So I did psychology. I have a licence en psychologie. And then I pursued music on the side. So I was working with a producer in Paris. We worked on a demo. So I wrote my own songs. He was producing the tracks. And that's when I first got my first taste of work in a music studio, which was amazing.
Wow. The Many Lives of Tiffany. I'm going to write a book. You had many lives.
It does sound like I have like a million lives in just
musician,
one.
Psychologist.
So that was in France. Then after I graduated with my licence, I decided to move to New York because I'm like, okay, I really want to pursue music now because I got my first taste in Paris and now I want to take it even further. So what ended up happening is my parents were like, okay, you can do this, but we're not gonna support you financially. You can go off to New York, but if you're not gonna pursue something, more conventional, you're on your own. Which was actually, I was talking to my husband. I said that was the greatest experience, having to figure things by myself, figure things out by myself, trying to make it on my own. Yes, I was a starving artist, but I had side jobs. I was an au pair, so we'll get into that more as we speak about parenting. But my years of childcare experience, that has been so beneficial. I was taking care of American kids. So I was an au pair in Westchester. The 2 kids were 6 and 2. And my job was to not only take care of them, but also speak to them in French because they were going to the French and American School of New York in Larchmont. And so the parents asked me to really only speak French to them. So I was doing activities with them in French.
You got to be creative.
I got really creative with them. And
I also want to say that your parents sending you off on your own is also a very French attitude of like se débrouiller, right? Like just manage on your own. Like I feel like we don't use that like débrouille-toi, like just figure it out, right? Like parents are like, no, we'll help you. What do you like parents writing their kids' college paper because they want to make sure
like here in the States, I feel like parents would never do that. Like
no, it's not the helicopter.
I feel like they parenting. Them a little bit.
Yeah, we have the helicopter parents. You guys have the
it's definitely
se débrouiller parents.
Débrouillez-vous. Absolutely. So so I was a nanny, and then I was pursuing music. So au pair first, and then I wanted to be in Manhattan, so I worked as a nanny again with another family who's the father's 2 children. Funnily enough, they were also adopted. They were from China, originally from China. 2 lovely girls, and I still have such great fond memories of them. And they went to the Lycée Français on the Upper East Side.
So they're older.
So they were older. Yeah, they were 8 and 12, I think, at the time. And so I was also, my job was to also help them with their homework and speak only in French to them, which is tricky also because once they figured out that my English was also good, they would try to like get over on me and try to talk to me in English. I do no, en français.
It's hard to keep a straight poker face. Like, non, je comprends pas. Non,
je comprends pas ce que tu dis. Répète-le en français. So many times. Yeah, so I was also, when I was in France, living in France, I also got this certificate called le BAFA, le brevet d'animateur. So yeah, I got like a formal training to actually take care of children in like centre de loisirs, like
Yeah, like a
daycare,
colonie de
daycare,
vacances
like
also.
a colonie.
That,
Exact. I did
yeah,
that. I did colonie de vacances. I
the
did
summer
centre
camps.
aéré.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
summer camps and
So it works for
daycares.
all those.
Yeah, exactly.
Brevet.
So I actually had formal training for that. And actually thinking about, in what's worked in terms of reinforcing the minority language at home with my children
Mhm.
has been all of those years of speaking in French to young children in these settings, in daycare,
Yep.
summer camp, as an au pair, as a nanny, because I truly got used to speaking in French to young children and
Mm,
learning all these songs for young children,
okay.
doing arts and crafts in French, like engaging with children from, all ages, really. When you think about it, I've taken care of newborns up
Mhm.
until like 13 or 14-year-old
Yeah, and
kids.
c'est pas évident. It's not obvious. Like,
Yeah.
especially for us if we're non-native, like, well, what are the lullabies that are, that I should sing? Or like,
Exactly.
what are the cute little words? I had a friend Misty on recently. Her husband's French, and she was like talking about the cute little words the parents-in-law will be like choupinette. She's like, I would never know that word. Where the hell would I ever know the word choupinette? So like it's not obvious unless
It's
you've either
not.
been around it, right? Like you've either been around
Exactly.
someone else raising kids, or it was like you
Exactly.
forced, like it was like your job, so like you had to learn it. But like, yeah, you're
Exactly.
like, you're not thinking of, you're pregnant, you're all excited, and then you're like,
Yeah.
okay, I know French, but like I don't know all the words. Like I don't know the words for
Yes.
like a little, I don't know, like the bib. What is that? Something about bave.
Bavoir,
Bavoir. There
that's
I
a good
go.
one. Bavoir, le bavoir.
There we go. I knew bave is to drool, so I'm like, it's something to do with drooling. I don't remember. But yeah, it's not super like obvious, if like you didn't grow up
No,
with it. Like
exactly.
even if you
And I
did grow
feel
up in
like,
France.
yeah, but I feel like through my training, I really was able to learn all these things, for kids, like all these songs, all these lullabies, like you were saying,
Yeah.
and all the term and the way you talk to children, but in French. Like I've
Mhm.
always taken care of children in French, and so I think that's really benefited me as
Mhm.
a mother of two now.
So tell us, what is your family language plan? What is who speaks what to whom? How did you decide
Yeah.
all that?
So, well, obviously, since we live in the United States, English is the majority
Of
community
course.
language, right? And my husband is American.
Okay.
He is Puerto Rican,
Mm.
but I will say he's one of those really Americanized Puerto
Mhm.
Ricans. So his Spanish is very bad, is very poor. Like
Mhm.
my Spanish is like 1,000 times better than his. He can't have a conversation in Spanish. He can
Okay.
understand
Is he a
to some
passive
degree.
bilingual? Yeah, he can understand a
Yeah,
lot.
he can
Yeah.
understand a lot, but he can't communicate with other Spanish speakers.
And again, that's practice, right? Like if you grow up in a
Yeah,
house where you've heard a language, no matter what language, right? You could grow up in a
yeah,
house with Japanese parents and understand, but if you don't put it into
yeah,
practice, you won't have those skills. And
exactly.
yeah, there's a lot, right? Of course, because there's such a high number of Spanish speakers here, there's a lot of passive bilinguals, these receptive bilinguals that they can understand Spanish, but then they don't necessarily practice speaking because they'll say things
Yeah,
to their parents in English and everybody just continues like that. Spanish, English,
yeah.
English. Yeah, and that's another one
But
of those things that
yeah,
can
but
happen.
I think for the Puerto Rican population from what I understand, because it was easy for me to judge them and say, why didn't your parents, like talking to my husband, Ro, why didn't your parents teach you Spanish? Come on, this is absurd. Your mother was a Spanish teacher. I don't
Oh, she
understand.
was,
Yeah. Like,
but it's
I
not
just,
so easy. Yeah.
it's not conceivable. I can't understand. But that's because I come from a different background. You
Yeah.
have to understand also the context in which, immigrant, second generation, like people that came from Puerto Rico. My husband's father, so my father-in-law, he was born in Puerto Rico, and then I think he was 7 or 8, he came to New York.
Mhm.
And then my mother-in-law, she was born in the Bronx.
Okay.
She grew up or Washington Heights. She grew up in New York, um, and so there was a lot in those days. There was a lot of, as you know, a lot of racism
Racism. Yep.
towards these people, this segment
100%.
of the population,
Mhm.
people coming from Puerto Rico or second generation, third generation, like you guys need to basically hearing people tell them, you guys need to really adapt to American life. You have to speak, you have to fit in, you have don't speak Spanish. Leave that language in on that island. Exactly. And now I'm starting to really understand that.
It's so much more complicated. Yeah. And there's a whole revolution of people seeing bilingualism as being a positive, because for so many years it was seen as, if you speak one, you're going to not speak the other as well. Like it's taking away from English. So we got to put all the resources on English. It was seen as 100%. And if you divide it into two, you're only going to have 50%. And like, that's not how it works at all. But that was the mentality, right? Like, well, we can't have Spanish because it's going to take away from your English and you got to speak good English. And yeah, I mean, many nationalities went through that, where there's these gaps in the generations where, like, well, my grandparents spoke Polish, Russian, whatever it is, Chinese, but then my parents don't, so I never learned, right? That's a very common story, unfortunately. And it's about fitting in. It's about
fitting in
the melting pot, and everybody has to speak English, and not knowing this, like, we didn't have the research, we didn't have the knowledge that you can be a competent bilingual and it won't take away from your, listen to you. When you speak French, when you speak English, you sound completely native in both. Like, it didn't take away from either of them.
Right? Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. It's really, it's too bad, but that's just too bad. It's almost like that's how it was.
Yeah. But now that Raul, my husband, sees the benefits of learning all these languages, for the kids he hears them speaking in French and he's amazed, and he hears them speaking in Spanish as well. And he's like, he regrets that, he didn't get that in the early years.
I regret it. It wasn't an option, but I regret it. I wish I had it.
Yeah. But he's just in awe over the progress that the kids are making.
Yeah.
And that's because they're getting, regular exposure. So so I speak from the time that they were born. I made that, decision, that command decision of saying to myself, I'm only going to speak French to them from the time that they're born. I slipped into that mode into the minute Amelia was born, my firstborn. The minute she came out of me, the second she came out of me, I held her in my arms and I spoke in French to her. Aww. And and it's been like that ever since. And even when Raul is around, even at the dinner table and she's talking to me, she'll talk to me in French. Yeah. And yes, there's the thing about code switching or mixing languages. She'll do that, of course. That's completely natural.
It's a normal
thing. She goes to a public pre-K, so she's exposed to English. She speaks in English to her father. Obviously that's the majority language. But when it comes to talking with Maman, we only speak in French. And even in the morning, when I first wake up and my mind goes to English right away, because what it's like when you first wake up, it's your native, the majority language that kicks in right away. Yeah. Even in the morning when she wakes up and she talks to me, she's talking to me in French, and I'm like, okay, I have to slip into French mode now.
Yeah, you need to get your brain like, okay, hold on.
Yeah, so that's great. And then now we're really starting to incorporate Spanish too, since I do speak Spanish. I guess I was reticent to really teach them Spanish or teach Amelia Spanish sooner, because I really wanted to focus on French, because I wanted her level of French to be as good as mine, like at a native level. And so and I also knew that in her early years and in Leo's years right now, they were both exposed to Spanish in a daycare setting. Okay. So yeah, we placed them in a daycare in Belleville with women who are from the Honduras, so they're Spanish, so they mainly speak in Spanish to the children.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, so the kids got Spanish from that, and you when I'd pick up Leo from that daycare, you would hear him, you'd say, no, it's mío, like he would say little words like mío, because that's what he hears other little kids saying.
There we go, first word mine.
Yeah, mío.
Oh my gosh, that's so. No, tell us, how did you learn Spanish? Obviously you were born in Colombia, but you left within a week, so you didn't learn any Spanish over there.
Exactly. So I started learning Spanish formally at the international school starting in sixth grade, I believe. En
Mm.
sixième. Yeah, I was 12 years old.
Yeah, that's when we start in the US. Sixth grade is when we started.
Yeah, I would argue that's too late.
Way too late, but yeah,
But yeah,
not gonna
right.
change the system now.
You're not going to change the system. But yeah, so I started learning en sixième. So I had 6 years, I guess, of Spanish. And but it never really led to me speaking fluently, right? Is you're learning, how to talk
Oh yeah.
a little bit, but it's basic.
We
I
could have a
never got to
whole
a point where I could
podcast on that.
speak. Yes,
And I was part of it.
absolutely.
I taught
Yeah.
high school, I
Don't get me
taught middle
started.
school, I taught English in elementary schools in France. So like I'm part of that. I'm a teacher, but I also think
Yeah.
the way we teach what we're asking of students to do, verb charts doesn't get you to speak, things like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's a whole nother pot of worms. We'll open another time.
Yeah, exactly. To be continued. But so I guess I started becoming really fluent when I moved to New York when I was living in Washington Heights. So there was a pretty significant Dominican population still to this day, even though it's kind of gentrified now. And so at the time I was living with a Dominican family in Washington Heights, and the mother, her English was very poor, so I had to communicate with her in Spanish. And so I was speaking Spanish on a daily basis because I was seeing her every day, and she was so sweet. She was like my second mother. So that really forced me to speak Spanish and to improve my speaking skills. And then also leading up to, like I mentioned, I went back to Colombia in 2012. So leading up to that trip to Colombia, I made also like a plan to really improve my speaking. So I was doing everything in Spanish. I remember I was watching movies in Spanish. I was reading books that I knew in English. I was checking them out of the library in Spanish. Yeah, I was talking more with the mother in Washington Heights, Felicia. Even though Dominican Spanish is really hard to understand. Oh my gosh.
I've had some friends from La República Dominicana, and it took me a minute to like, wait, hold on, slow down.
Because they skip.
I love each accent. I love the accents. I love it, but it's just the islands in particular tend to talk fast and cut things.
They talk so fast. Yeah, it was there were times when I couldn't understand her, and I would say, I don't, can you repeat that slower? You need to speak slower. But anyway,
your relationship that really speaks to like, what do we need, or what do our kids need, is they need a relationship. They need a reason, right? Whether that reason is us or school or whatever it is, but like the relationships are such a strong part, and as a teacher, we try and build that with like our community, right? Like I teach for a company and like we try and make it like we're a family, right? Like we all are studying French or Spanish, and like we have these events monthly, and we're like a big family. Like you need people. Like that's why like these apps, like everybody has apps, Duolingo, Memrise, whatever the app you choose, but it's not a person. It's not a back and forth. It's not an exchange like you and I are having in English. That's so much different than, can you choose the right word? Is it S or esta? Like you're not going to learn Spanish that way. No, you need to make the mistake, and the person's going to, like, what do you mean by this? And then you're going to have that conversation, and that just that drive. I feel like, having friends or having someone in your life for a reason, like a trip, is such a motivating factor. Like, okay, I know I want to go to this country, so let me, amp up my studying. And you can create that for yourself, right? It's not that you have to suddenly find a second mom from Colombia. Like, I'm gonna find this woman so I can amp up my Spanish. No, like you can find little reasons. But I think the relationship is huge, and we want to give that to our kids, right? Like you talk to Maman en français, like you speak to me in French. Like that's just our relationship.
Exactly.
Like yours was all English, even with your French father. So
yeah, exactly. No, I want to reverse that with her, with the kids, and so I want them to focus on French. So so then I spent several months in Colombia, and that's really when I became fluent. I would say is my trip in Colombia, because I was forced to speak Spanish exclusively throughout those several months I was there, especially in rural areas in Colombia where nobody speaks anything besides Spanish. And I volunteered on a farm turned hostel in the Boyacá region. It was I had unbelievable experiences there. That I want to say
another life of Tiffany.
Yeah. I want to say like Yeah, I want to say that that trip was really the catalyst for both like environmental advocacy
Ah,
and just connecting to my roots,
yes.
connecting to the Latina in me,
And literally the
which
land.
I don't want to criticize my parents. It's not their fault.
Mm.
Yeah, literally the land. But I
Literally
was never
connected to
exposed to that
raíces.
culture.
Right. I did
Yeah,
want to
las
ask, but
raíces.
I know it's kind of sensitive. Like, and, we were talking about how adoption is such a sensitive topic. And I think parents who try and, make a bond with, let's say I adopt a child from China, like, am I going to
Right.
try and forge a bond? I don't even speak Chinese. Like, how do I do that?
Yeah.
Right. Can I
How do I do
celebrate the
that?
new year? But yeah,
Yeah.
that's a whole nother like huge
Yeah.
undertaking if you are going to
It
say,
is.
okay, we have this child, let's how do we honor your roots, like how do we do it in a way that's not
Yes.
what do I want to say, like just stereotypical, like,
Yes.
like, oh, you're Chinese, so you must like dumplings, or something that's just like super stereotypical, right? Like you got to do it in an authentic way. And I know parents have, actually I have a colleague, job I had a long time ago, an ESL teacher, and I think he had like hired a tutor to help his child. There's ways of doing it, but yeah, it's
Mm,
such a it's another whole
it
like
is.
side job if you're gonna
It
do that.
is. It's work. It's
It's
you have
work.
to create a plan,
I mean, bilingual parenting is work, right? If we're gonna
It's
bilingual, even if it's our native tongue, and you're like, okay,
yes.
I just want to raise my kids in my native tongue, it's work. It doesn't
It's
happen
work.
automatically. And I think that's the hardest thing. And so many guests have come on and said, I just thought it would happen. My husband's French. I just thought they would speak French. Like, or like I just thought I would speak to them and that would be enough. But like you said,
Mm,
you have this whole like, not a degree, but like you've done this training, because it takes like activities, and like you have
it
to read
does.
books, and like read books to your kids, like do things with them. It's not enough to just, here's your food, okay, good night. Like
Yeah.
you need to
Yeah.
you need to be so aware and so intentional. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yes.
And even not to
Absolutely.
switch back, because like you said, English is your dominant language.
It
We
is.
all have one that's going to be dominant depending on where we're living, who we talk to
Right.
every day. And it's
Right.
so easy to slip in. Like you said, you wake up, the first thing your brain's thinking in English.
English.
It's just like automatic, and
It is.
have to literally force yourself. I would, every day I would struggle because I was raising my kids in Polish, and that's not my top, it's not my native language, it's not even my best, it's like my third. I speak Spanish and French better than Polish, and it would be like, okay,
Oh.
here we go, let's do this. Get myself like ramped up, like gotta speak, and it became automatic, like because you do say a lot of the same things.
Yeah, so I really became fluent in Colombia, and then fast forward to now, I still use Spanish a lot because, as I mentioned, there's a pretty big Latino population in where we live in New Jersey, in Belleville. So like communicating with the daycare ladies, like I have to communicate with them in Spanish. I You could tell I'm Latina, so when I walk around the main street here in Belleville, and or I go into a business, a lot of the businesses are owned by Latino people, so they'll see me and right away they'll start speaking to me in Spanish. Yeah, so and I answer back in Spanish,
Right.
because I am at ease.
Right. And that is
I
a
my
double-edged sword. Like you were saying,
Yeah.
though, like your husband's Puerto Rican, people might do the same to him, but he's not
Yes.
Eddie's. So yeah, it's kind of that
Yeah.
double-edged sword of being, having a certain look and people assuming things about you.
Exactly. Exactly.
Mhm. Has it
So
motivated your husband at all to like, are you speaking a little Spanish? Or no, you're saying you're only doing French in the house, right?
so we started, actually. Yeah, that's a good question. We started incorporating Spanish now that my daughter is older. So she, like I said, she's going to turn 5, and
5.
she's really able to distinguish between French and Spanish. Now she's really able to make that distinction, and she's showing an interest. She's telling me, I'd like to, start watching shows in Spanish. So she'll watch Dora
Nice.
in Spanish or
Yeah.
Diego in Spanish, and she's picking up. I can tell that she's right now she's just passively learning,
Right.
and we're translating things at home. So whenever she says something in French, I'll ask her, like, how do you say that in comment tu dis ça en espagnol? How do you say that in Spanish? Like sac a dos, like backpack. Like, how do you say
Yeah.
sac a, because I know that she's learning that with Dora. Of course,
Right.
she knows what
Exactly.
that
La
is. And
mochila.
la mochila.
And it's
And
very different, right? So those words are good to point out because they're not necessarily the close words like, restaurante. It's like, okay, it's the same. Like, we don't need to point that one out. Mm-hmm. Oh, I lost you again. Oh,
right.
Oh, you're back.
Yeah, and we do point out when, but yeah, and we will point out if there's a word in French that sounds very similar to a word in Spanish. We will say, oh, look, I'll point out, I'll say, Emilia, look, it sounds the same, almost the same.
Yeah.
Like, je comprends. Well, you can say in Spanish, yo comprendo.
Yeah. And that'll help her retain it. Yeah.
Exactly. If she makes that, connection with French, now she has that frame of reference. She knows the French language. She's very comfortable with the French language, because she also takes a weekly French class nice. In Montclair. So I mentioned that we live close to Montclair, and there's a pretty big French community in Montclair. There's the Alliance Française in Montclair. Yeah, and so I wanted her to take a French class on a weekly basis, and I researched, and I found this nonprofit organization called Parlez-vous Français. And it was started by a group of French expat parents who wanted their kids to continue with the French education, but their kids are still enrolled in the American public school system, but they wanted them to be able to take a weekly, or I think at the time when they first started, they offered 2 classes, but now it's only once a week, where they could continue. It's not learning French as a second language. No, it's only open to French or Francophone families. So the kids have to have already an exposure, exposure to the French language through one or both parents at home, which was our case. Right. So and
what
so
kind of things
like
are they
every
learning?
Thursday.
Sorry if they're not learning
everything.
Just
everything basically that you learn in the American preschool system, they're learning. They're fitting all of that into the 2-hour time frame. Wow. And as they get older, they're going to have a lot of homework. It's very rigoureux, like we were talking about, rigorous. Like because it's intense. It's 2 hours, but it's they work on writing at this age, writing their name or in cursive too, which is great.
Yeah,
because I don't think they learn cursive in the American school system.
I don't think so anymore.
They sing songs in French. They do arts and crafts, everything, to improve their fine motor skills, expand on their vocabulary. And she's just made tremendous progress in the French language. Yes, it's thanks to me speaking to her, but it's also being reinforced by a more formal setting where you can tell she's improving, because she's talking also with other children who, there's a little girl that started with Emilia. So, 2 years ago. And the little girl was a French girl. Both her parents are French. And so she was speaking with her every week. And, at first, and when Emilia first started, she was mixing. It was more like she was speaking in English, even in the class. But now she's only, like, I listened to them the other day, and like, she's only speaking French in that classroom setting. She knows that once she's in classe de français, we only speak en français.
Ça y est.
Ça y est. It's le déclic est fait.
No, but that's like you said, it's there's so many like intentional things that we have to decide. And I know we do have that here. We have like Saturday school that some people do, and I know I've heard about that in other communities as well. Like, so that exists nearby for us for Polish, but also I've heard of other like Vietnamese and Chinese. Like, people have these little schools because, again, all these parents with the same desire, like, man, like, we are from this country, we want our kid to speak it, but we don't necessarily want to pay for like a private school, or maybe exist, like, we just need like a little Saturday school. So I think theirs is like 3 hours, and they were too small back in the day. They actually gave me and my friend Polish classes, which was fun. But I would see all the little kids and they would talk to us. It was really sweet. We might end up enrolling them again. We'll see. But
it helps. Every little bit helps. I mean, you mentioned private schools. I mean, at first I was looking into that option, but when I looked at the price, the tuition was just, it's out of this world. I don't know how people can afford it.
It's really, that is a scary fact. I've looked at it just out of curiosity, and just being a French teacher, like, oh, I wonder if they're hiring, just on those kind of websites, and like, how do they ask that for a 4-year-old? Like,
exactly. It's like 30,000.
What in the world are they doing in that school? Like,
exactly.
Is she gonna come out with a diploma? Like, what? No, it's shocking. It's
It's
really
very shocking, especially like I was looking up, I was interested just by comparison. I was interested in what my parents paid for us to go to the
oh
Lycée International, just by comparison, just to compare. And I looked it up and it was like, I don't know, $4,000 a year.
well, yeah,
Like,
you could compare university here to university in France, because I know
well, there's that too, yeah.
I did my studies there. It only cost a couple thousand, and I was like, oh, that would have covered my books in the US. It's like, yeah, I think it was like 1,000 for like the whole year, or 1,000 for a semester. It's like, yeah, that
Yeah,
wouldn't have even covered my yeah, maybe my books and
yeah,
one meal. Yeah, it's
exactly.
insane. It's
It's
insane.
insane.
Yeah.
It's a whole business, but like
There we
you were
go.
saying before, that's a whole other another conversation.
Yeah, we don't have time to get into that
Yeah, exactly.
for sure. All right. Well, oh my gosh, there's like, we could just keep talking for 5 hours,
I
honestly.
know.
So I want to know what tips, I know you just gave us like some things that you do with your daughter and your son, but like, looking back right now, you've done French since birth, so that's just like the natural. Now you're adding Spanish. So like, what's going through your mind when you're like, how are we going to add this? How are we going to fit this in? Kind of some tips if somebody's listening and saying, okay, I've been speaking English, I want to add in a language.
Yeah.
What has been going through your mind, or what kind of tips would you give? Or
So everything really stemmed from a trip that we took last year to Puerto Rico.
ooh,
And yeah, that was a trip that was my Christmas present to my husband, who had never been to Puerto Rico. He's 39 and he had never been to
yeah,
Puerto Rico. And
it's crazy,
I
right?
wanted, it's crazy. Yeah.
And
Another
there's a
thing
lot
that's
of people in
crazy.
that boat. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And that also took a while for me to understand, but now I do.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted him to discover his roots, in the same way
Yeah.
that I went back to Colombia. I wanted him to discover his roots, and for my children to start understanding also. I
Yeah.
mean, Leo's too small, right? At the time
There'll
gosh,
be
he was not even
pictures.
2 years old. Yeah, exactly.
Picture. You can
But
talk about it down the road.
yeah, but my firstborn Amelia is starting to understand that she's Puerto Rican,
Right.
right? That her father's Puerto Rican, therefore she's Puerto Rican.
Right.
And Puerto Rican people speak Spanish. And so all of that really was reinforced when we took that trip to Puerto Rico.
Mm-hmm.
She was hearing Spanish everywhere. She even started picking up Spanish. I could see, and we were just there for 10 days, or not
Mm-hmm.
even 10 days. But you could see her little brain working, like she was putting two and two together, basically.
Yeah.
So she understood that in Puerto Rico you speak Spanish,
It makes it
not
very
French.
real. Yeah.
Exactly, that she was connecting this new place. She had been to France with me
Mm-hmm.
before many times. I took her on her first trip to France when she was 2.5 months old. So yeah, she's been to France many times. She knows that in France we speak French.
Right.
But I wanted her and Leo to start understanding that there's also another culture in our family, right? Where we represent three cultures, and I would argue
Mm-hmm.
even four, right? Because
Yeah.
Puerto Rican culture is different from Colombian
Right.
culture. So yeah, I think that was really the incentive for us to the impetus for us to really start incorporating more Spanish into our family.
Mm-hmm.
So
Coming
I
back, how do you do that? Like that's all
yeah,
great, but like if I can't afford a trip,
yeah, exactly,
or I don't
exactly.
even have a native, right? Like maybe I'm just an American who wants to speak Spanish to my
Yes,
kids. Like,
yes,
where do I start?
absolutely. Yeah. So I've been looking for a while for classes, Spanish classes, in addition to her weekly French class, for her to really start learning Spanish in a more formal setting.
Mm-hmm.
And so I found one. And there was actually a possibility for my husband to take Spanish classes at the same time. It's like a mommy and me, or parent and me
Yeah, yeah.
class, for 2 hours on a weekly basis. We can't fit it in our schedule right now, but
Mm-hmm.
she's gonna do this summer Spanish immersion camp. So
Cool.
in August, she's going to be going to this place in Rutherford, and she's going to be just being exposed to only Spanish through activities in the summer camp.
How fun.
So yeah, so we'll continue that hopefully in the fall too. Just keep up with these classes, and
Mm-hmm.
like I mentioned, I think that she's starting to want to watch TV in Spanish. Now that is something that is it's a huge part also of her learning a language, because with French, I discovered that on Netflix, you can watch shows and you can change the audio to other languages, right?
Yeah.
So I never let her watch Gabby's Dollhouse in English. From the beginning, when we first started watching Gabby's Dollhouse, I started letting her watch it in French. So she thinks it's a French show. That's what she thinks, because she's never seen it in English.
Right.
I never let her watch it in English. And I knew she was going to like that show because she loves kitties. That's her thing. She's a cat lady. And, you know, you have this little colored girl, Gabby, and her cat. That's Amelia. She's a little colored girl too with her cat. So I knew she was going to love that. So she started watching that whole show in French. And that helps with vocabulary. Yeah. So shows in Spanish like Dora and Diego, that's also going to reinforce the language. And like I said, for me to start really, not so much speaking to her in Spanish, because again, my focus is on French.
Right.
And my Spanish is not native. You know, it's not a native. I mean, I can speak it fluently, but I feel like I don't have that proper accent, so that I want her to pick up on. So I do little things here and there where I translate something in English or in French to Spanish, you know, and I try to give it my best accent.
Reinforcing.
Yeah, but little
hurt.
Things here and there. Yeah. And my in-laws, so they, of course, they speak fluent Spanish, right? My husband's father and mother. Unfortunately, it's really sad, because I think that if my mother-in-law didn't have late stage Alzheimer's, she'd be teaching our kids Spanish. Yeah. And it breaks my heart for many reasons, not just the fact that she can't speak Spanish to them, but that she's slipping away, that she's being robbed of time with her children. That's horrible. Yeah, my father-in-law, he'll say things there here and there in Spanish to the kids, but it's not consistent. It's not like, you know, I did ask him many years. I mean, when we first found out that I was pregnant with Amelia, I did ask him, hey, you know, can you make sure to speak in Spanish to the kids? But again, it's just not something that's natural, right? If he never did that with his own kids, it's going to be even more difficult with his grandchildren that he doesn't see nearly as much. So
a lot to ask. You know, you can ask it, but you can't always reinforce. It's just it's out of your hands.
Exactly.
You can only control the language you're using and what you're doing.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but you know, it helps that that Amelia has friends that are you know, little Latino kids, right? That she has a lot in her class. Like there's mainly Hispanic children.
That's great.
So, you know, maybe we can arrange to have play dates with them, and maybe for her to start speaking Spanish with her friends more. That's you know, that's my goal for this year, is to that Spanish class, the Spanish summer camp, having play dates with other children who are Spanish speaking, that all of that helps.
Yeah, it's all gonna help, and it's all gonna, like, little by little add up. And it's just, and it's already such a normalized thing, right? Like, in this place I speak this, in this place I speak this. Like, she's already got that plasticity, that flexibility, that she's aware of other languages, right? So we've already, you know, opened their world up. And, you know, as I always say, we don't know what they're going to do when they're 15 and they have the chance to take a language in high school. You know, like, we don't know what they'll pick and what will come of these little, I like to think of it as seeds we're planting, right? Like, we're just planting the seeds, and you know, you've got your language you're focused on, right? French is your focus language, and if she takes off with Spanish, great. But if she doesn't, it could come up later, right? She could be 10 and then decide she really wants to do Spanish.
Exactly.
You know, who knows? It's like, you can't really, like we were saying with your in-laws, you can't force your kids either, right? Like, you can offer them opportunities. Hey, you want to watch this? You want to do this fun camp? But, like, you know, it's ultimately like anything. Give them options and then hope that they choose.
Exactly. But I think a huge part of, you know, we were talking about relationship. I want to say that what really helps is also building a positive relationship with a language and a culture, right? So if we celebrate all of these different, and I tell them, I tell my kids that they should be proud of all these cultures that they're embodying. Like, this is amazing. Not everybody can say, well, in my kids' case, not everybody can say, I'm Puerto Rican, I'm Colombian, I'm French, and I speak fluent English. Like, that's amazing. That's 4 different things that you're representing.
Yeah. And if they were born here, they're American. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I hopefully we'll make a trip to when the kids are a little older, obviously, and things are safe and everything, to
Mhm.
Colombia, because I
Mhm.
really want them to understand that they represent all these different cultures and to love those cultures, to
Yeah.
embrace their various roots.
Yep.
So
The
that's
diversity,
going to
like you
help.
said, just because it's both
Diversity.
Latino, Puerto Rico is a whole different world than Colombia, and for good reason, right?
Oh
Different food,
yeah,
different accent, different
exactly.
everything, dances, music, all sorts, right?
Exactly.
Yes, they share
Yeah,
Spanish, but they're their own. I mean, in the same way that if I go to where I'm from in, Massachusetts, Connecticut, it's very different than going to the South and being in Texas or
exactly.
Kentucky or somewhere. Right?
Exactly. That celebrating the diversity,
Exactly.
that's hugely important. And even within our family, my kids are look so different. I mean, they have the same, very similar features, but their skin color, their skin tone is so different. And
Mm,
I want them to celebrate that rather than thinking, oh, I look too dark, or for Leo to say, oh, to have a complex when growing up, thinking, oh, I don't look Latino enough because I'm not brown enough because he's very light skinned. Like,
mhm.
I want them to go to Colombia to see, and even in Puerto Rico, there were people that looked so different from one another.
Yeah.
You can't say this person looks Puerto Rican.
Right.
And in Colombia, you cannot say this person looks typically Colombian. There's
Mhm.
people that Afro-Colombian, right, that are
Yeah.
dark and black. And then there are people that are very light skinned, even blonde people or red-headed people. And I know it sounds
Everything.
really crazy, but that's the beauty of Latino people, is that we're a
Yeah.
mix of so many different backgrounds, ethnicities.
Mhm.
So
Oh, and I think you're well on your way to getting your kids lots of exposure and just kind of normalizing it, right? Like this is just
exactly.
we're all different, but we have these languages, these cultures, things that we can actually enjoy because we understand more, right? Languages give us
Exactly.
that key to understand more, because you can
Exactly.
go to Colombia without speaking Spanish, but you're not as deeply involved in
Immersed.
what everything happening and what people are saying. And I mean, I'm all for
Exactly.
traveling. I'm not going to learn every language of the world, but when it's your own, right, there's like more of
Yeah.
a tie to it.
Connection. Exactly.
Exactly, a connection.
Yeah.
Okay. I would love if you could teach us a word or a phrase. Could be French, it could be Spanish, it could be whatever you'd like.
Oh, okay. Well, in French, of course, since I do have two cat lovers in my family,
Okay.
both my kids love cats. There's an expression, and I don't know if you know it. It's called "donner la langue au chat." Do you know
Mm.
that one?
Yeah, I mean, I've heard it. We've done a lot with like idioms and things, but I can
Yeah.
teach you.
So
Mhm.
yeah, so it's translated into "donner la langue au chat" means give your tongue to the cat. And
Literally.
what it yeah, literally. And what it means is, if say, like, for example, someone wants you to guess something,
Mhm.
and you can't, for some reason, you try to guess but you can't, and then after a while you say, I give up. You could say, je
Mhm.
donne ma langue au chat. I
Mhm.
don't know where that comes from, like, where
Why? Yeah.
to look into it. Specifically, why a cat? Why are you giving
Mm.
your what does that mean, like giving your tongue
Well,
to
we
a
have
cat?
weird idioms like the cat's out of the bag. Now we know
Yeah,
the secret. Like,
exactly.
why is it a cat coming out of a bag? I don't know.
And why is it like
Yeah,
cat got your tongue when you're
cat's
quiet?
got your
Why do they
tongue.
say cats got your tongue? I don't know.
They could
But I
really
thought
get
that
in
was
there
fun.
with their what do you call those? Their claw, and
Claw.
like get your tongue, and you couldn't talk. I could imagine it. I could actually visualize that one.
Yeah.
Oh,
So that would be the French one.
nice, nice. Okay.
Yeah, and Spanish. This is a short one, but I spending having spent time in Colombia,
Mhm.
I notice a lot of people say, and also in other South American countries, they say "que chévere" when something's
Mhm.
cool.
Yeah, I like that one. Chévere.
Yeah, "que chévere."
How cool. Yeah.
Yeah, how
And every
cool.
country has their own word for cool, right? Like maybe
Exactly.
not every country, but there's like definite regional variations, Mexico versus South America versus Spain. Yeah, that's a good one.
Exactly.
Chévere.
Yeah. Que chévere.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, it was really such a pleasure. Where can we find more about you, or if we want to connect with you, where can we get in touch?
Yeah. So I run a blog site called Maman Earth. And that can be found at www.mamanearth. So
Spell it.
MAMANEARTH. Yeah, because it's maman, it's in French,
Maman
right?
with the
Maman.
N. Yeah.
Yeah, with the N, earth.com. So it's a blog site all about sustainable parenting, So I give tips on simplicity in your life as a parent, friendly activities, tips on bilingualism, so reinforcing the target language at home, all of that. And the Instagram is Maman Earth, again, Maman. And between Maman and Earth, there's an underscore.
Perfect.
So
and I will put it all into the show notes so that people can just click and find it really easily. Okay.
Wonderful.
Well, merci infiniment. Such a
Merci
pleasure. And yes, we will send people your way and they can get in touch if they want to know more, because there are so many things that we kind of touched on and we couldn't get more into. So maybe have you back on. You can update us how Spanish is going. And yeah,
I would love to.
Yeah, we'll definitely catch up again. Well, merci infiniment.
It was a pleasure. Merci à toi. It was a pleasure, truly.
Pleasure's all mine. Yes, you're welcome back anytime.
Thank you. Definitely interested.